time at 9:30. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Holt. I'm the chair of the BPPE Advisory Committee, and welcome to our fall meeting. We'll start with welcome and introductions and establishing our forum. And so to that end, we'll go with an introduction of the members. As I mentioned, my name is Joseph Holt. I'm an institutional representative and chair of the committee. Margaret, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Margaret Ryder. I'm the vice chair and consumer representative.
Thank you. And Kansen, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, Kansen Chu, community member.
Thank you. And Melanie Delgado?
I'm Melanie Delgado. I'm a consumer representative.
And Tess Dubois-Carey?
Hi, good morning. Tess Dubois-Carey, institutional representative.
Lee Farron?
Good morning, Lee Farron, a consumer representative.
Okay. And do we have a representative from Senator Roth's office? Hearing none. And representative from Assembly Member Medina's office? Okay. And then last but certainly not least, Debbie Cochran, the chief. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair Holt. So Debbie Cochran, Bureau Chief at the Bureau for Private Postsecondary Education. Happy to be here with you all today. And I also just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge another staff person who truly needs no introduction to this group. After 18 years with the Bureau, Lisa Raffretti, who is the Deputy Bureau Chief here, is right on the cusp of retirement, and this will be her final advisory committee meeting. So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce her, so to speak, as a way of thanking her for all she's done for the Bureau and for students and consumers over the last 18 years. Lisa, can you come on and say hi?
Good morning, and thank you, Debbie, for the kind words. It's been a lot of hard work and a lot of changes, and definitely going in the right direction. And I leave the Bureau in great hands. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Hate to see you go. It's Margaret.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you so much for all the great work that you've done. You've been the power behind the power for as long as I've been doing this. You're always at the right elbow of whoever the chief is, and all the transitions that there's been in leadership. You've been, at least in my span, the single constant that was the subject matter expert. You know where things were, and especially almost like an institutional historian. Like, you know where all the bodies are and why this happened then, and why we made that decision. And so a huge loss for the Bureau, just your implicit knowledge and the things that you just know history. Appreciate your public service and your dedication and your role, and surely be missed.
Thank you, Joseph.
Very good. All right. Well, that we can confirm that we have, Richard, you can confirm we have a quorum. For that. Today's meeting will be run according to the Begley-Keene Open Meeting Act and the Brown Act as well. We will have public comment at the conclusion of each agenda item prior to any actions taken by the committee. Just a quick note about
Joseph, this is Margaret. I'm having a little trouble hearing you. I don't know if it's your sound or my microphone, but
is anybody else having difficulty hearing me?
Yes, me too. Kansen Chu.
Okay. 1 second. Let me
This
check.
is the moderator. It happened when you leaned back.
Got it. So I've just switched microphones. Is that a better sound there?
much better.
Okay.
Yes, better.
Thank you. Thanks, Margaret, for pointing that out. I appreciate it. I don't often know if people are listening to me or not, so it's good that you that you brought that up. So to repeat myself, today's meeting will be conducted according to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act and the Brown Act. We will have public comment at near the conclusion of every agenda item prior to any actions taken by the committee. A note on public comments: they are intended for information to the advisory committee. They're not a conversation and not really a venue for questions. There will be an email address listed at each of those junctures on the agenda. And so if you have a question for the BPPE, you can use that to submit questions. The committee is happy to entertain public comments and to take your comments under consideration. There is a 3-minute time limit for those public comments.
Joseph, I have a question, this is Margaret, I'm not quite clear about. If there's a public speaker and there's something they say that we want more information about, are we allowed to ask them questions at that time? Or just say, can we even say, I'd like more information on this, could you send it to the Bureau, or just nothing?
We are not, except, Margaret, that we can put it on a future agenda item. So to the extent that you're interested or want follow-up on that, you can bring it up under future agenda items, and we would put it on as a topic for discussion, and then the Bureau staff could be prepared for that, and it would be noticed on the next agenda. And unfortunately, it is a little awkward. We can't get into Q&A and back and forth to clarify their comments or questions. Bureau staff can reach out to them afterwards, and so that's why we do encourage members of the public to email your questions or concerns to the Bureau staff. Did that answer your question, Margaret?
Yeah, thanks for the clarification, because in the past, sometimes we have been doing that and not told otherwise.
Yeah.
Mr.
It
Chair,
makes sense, yeah.
Assembly Member Jose Medina here, just came on. Is it all right if I just say thank you to everyone on the committee and the Bureau, and thank Kevin Powers for representing me so well for the last number of years, and just say that as Chair of Higher Education, I've very much enjoyed working both with the Bureau and this committee. So just thanking everyone, and a shout out to Kansan as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Assembly Member. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining on the call. We're happy to have you. So we have established our quorum. We're going to go ahead and jump into the agenda. The first agenda item is public comment on items that are not on the agenda. So as I noted a moment ago, for every agenda item, you'll have opportunities, the public, to comment on those items. And we would ask that you keep your comments at that time restricted to the specific item that we're discussing. This, at the beginning of the meeting, is an open forum. You still have the 3-minute limit, but we're happy to accept comments for anything that you might have that, again, is not listed on the agenda. So we'll go ahead and open the IT administrator will help facilitate that. Thank you in advance for all your help throughout the meeting. We'll go ahead and do that now.
We are now open for public comment for items not on the agenda. In the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you should find a Q&A box where you can type the word comment if you wish to make a comment. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. As said before, we will have a 3-minute time limit, and I'll give you a 30-second warning. Let's wait just a few seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the review and approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which took place on August 18th. We've all received a copy of those minutes in advance in our meeting materials and have had a chance to review. So I would open up discussion now among the advisory committee members to see if there are any corrections or revisions to the minutes as published. Hearing none, I would accept or entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Kansan. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
I think I didn't see who the second was there.
So sorry, Tess Dubois Carey, I'll second.
Oh, thank you, Tess. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll move forward with a vote to approve the minutes as submitted.
Matter of order, sir.
Yes, please.
Public comment after a motion.
Yes, thank you. So we'll open to public comment regarding the review and approval of the minutes of our August 18th meeting.
We are now open for public comment on the motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes, thank you for your help and guidance. So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Richie, do you want to take a roll call votes? Is Richie on the call?
Sure. Joseph Hope,
Aye.
Margaret Ryder,
Yes.
Kansen Chu,
Aye.
Melanie Delgado,
Aye.
Testi Bakary,
Aye.
Assemblymember Jose Medina, looks like he's no longer with us. He's a non-voting member. Apologize. Leah Farron.
Aye.
That's all members.
Very good. Thanks very much, Richie. Okay, we will move on to agenda item 4. We're happy to welcome remarks by a representative of the DCA, including updates to Bureau operations and other items.
Wonderful. And I think we actually have with us today Melissa Gear, who is DCA's Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations. New to this committee and to DCA, so welcome, Melissa.
Good morning. Thank you. And hello and good morning, Chair and members. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to provide the Department of Consumer Affairs update. I am Melissa Gear. I am the new Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Relations. I started on October 3rd and have been getting up to speed and look forward to working with all of you. So our first update is giving you an update about the DCA staff, not only myself, as I said, who started on October 3rd, and I bring with me a wealth of experience, having served as the Chief Deputy Legislative Director at the Department of Insurance since 2014. I've also worked at the California Teachers Retirement System, or CalSTRS, as well as the Attorney General's office and the Legislative Analyst's office. So I'm excited to be here and to use all of my knowledge to help and support all of you. In addition, we also have just hired Yvonne Durantes, who started on Monday. So we're 2 new team members. She is the new Assistant Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations. She's been serving as a Senior Emergency Services Coordinator at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services since 2022. And she was a Policy Analyst and Task Force Coordinator since 2019. She was an Executive Fellow at Cal OES from 2018 to 2019, and we're very excited to have her join me and our small BBR team. So you will probably see a lot of her also. Also wanted to give you an update on what DCA has been doing in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Director Kirk Meyer established the department's first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee, or DEI committee, to guide the department in its equity strategy, initiatives, and action plans. The DEI committee held its first kickoff meeting on November 9th. It was a great meeting and a lot of good things came out of it. So we're excited to see where that goes. So look for additional announcements in the future. Next, I wanted to provide you an update on our strategic plan. So in accordance with Governor Newsom's executive order, strategic plans in effect July 2023 and beyond must be developed or updated to more effectively advance equity and drive outcomes and increase opportunity for all. In response, DCA is revising its strategic planning processes to incorporate more inclusive public engagement, data analysis, and embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into the strategic planning process. Over the coming months, the DEI committee will inform the strategic planning process. By March 2023, DCA will begin implementing the revised processes and working with the boards in updating existing strategic plans or developing new strategic plans. Also want to give an update on our Promise campaign. So it's that time of year again. DCA is excited to take part in the Our Promise California State Employees Giving at Work once more and celebrate 65 years of caring for California. This year, our Promise Vice Chair is Lourdes Castro Ramirez, Secretary of the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, and our DCA co-chairs are Chief Deputy Director Christine Lally and myself. The campaign began on October 1st and will end on December 31st. The campaign allows Californians to donate to a nonprofit or nonprofits of their choice. With your assistance, DCA hopes to continue its tradition of generosity and caring for our communities through this year's campaign. Please assist us in spreading the word and encouraging all members and staff to make a one-time donation or donate online through Cal Employee Connect. California can be cared for as little as $5 a month. I'd also note that we are doing a campaign in which you probably will see my face as well as Debbie's face also in our new campaign that we're doing, where we've done some testimonials. So either you'll see videos or written testimonies with our pictures about why we have chosen to give this year. So look for that. That should be coming soon. Also, for in-person meeting guidelines, excuse me, and COVID-19 safety measures, though legislation passed allowing remote meetings through June 30th, 2023, we are reminding boards and bureaus that choose to hold in-person meetings of the safety measures, best practices, and recommendations for holding public meetings. When planning for upcoming meetings, please remember, all board and bureau members and staff are expected to follow the state and local public health guidelines that apply in the area where meetings are being held. The California Department of Public Health released updated guidance for the use of face masks. Please refer to the guidance ahead of meetings to determine the appropriate masking approach for your meeting. If masks are recommended for your meeting location, please post face covering guidance signage at your meeting check-in or entrance. Also, in addition, wanted to mention board member travel. As travel begins to pick up, it's important to remember that state travel arrangements must be made through DCA's approved travel agency, Cal Travel Store or Concur. All board and bureau members and staff must use the most economical fares possible when traveling by air on official state business. Typically, this would be the Southwest Want to Get Away option. However, there may be additional charges if changes are made to the flight. Flight changes to the date and time for personal convenience are not approved or a justified reason, and the traveler will be responsible for any associated charges. Additionally, AB 1887 prohibits state agencies, departments, boards, authorities, and commissioners from traveling to states that are subject to California's travel ban. There are now 23 prohibited states on the website of the Attorney General that you can view the entire list if you go there. We're just about finished. Next, we have the partnership with the State Controller's Office. DCA will partner with the State Controller's Office to share information with consumers and certain licensees about the Unclaimed Property Program. State law requires banks, insurance companies, corporations, and other entities to report and submit their customers' property to the SCO after a period of inactivity, generally 3 years. Certain DCA licensees will benefit from this partnership as well as it will educate them about their responsibility to report unclaimed property and assist with compliance. Additionally, the program is a great source for all consumers to locate their unclaimed property. And it really does work. So if you haven't taken a look in a while, you might be surprised what you might find. And so in closing, I just would like to say once again, thank you for allowing me this opportunity. And as always, DCA is here to help. And if there's anything that we can do to assist, please reach out. And if you have any questions or anything related to your members or anything related to your meetings, please feel free to reach out to the BBR team. Myself and Yvonne are always willing and able to be of assistance. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Melissa, and welcome to the new position. It's been a month, so you probably have everything figured out, I would guess, by now.
Exactly. Thank you.
Advisory committee members, do you have any comments or questions for Melissa? Very good. Thank you. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and open for public comment on agenda item 4 and the remarks from the DCA.
We are now open for public comment on agenda item 4. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no requests for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please, and thank you. And thank you again, Melissa. You have a great day.
You too.
Very good. We'll move on to agenda item 5, and really the heart of our agenda in the operations update from Bureau staff in the various categories. And Debbie, I will hand it over to you. I don't know if we're going to take items in order or if you have any juggling to do.
Today, we actually are able to take them all in order, which makes it nice and simple. So we will kick off with IT system project update, and we have Sean O'Connor once again with us today to give us that update.
Great. Thank you, Chief Cochran, as well as Chair Holt and the other advisory committee members. It looks like my voice is coming through, but I just want to confirm that everyone can hear me. Okay, thank you for the nods. Always appreciate that. So as Debbie had mentioned, I am here to give you another project update. Previously, at the last meeting, I had mentioned that I had transitioned to a new role at a different state agency, but to provide kind of continuity of planning and making sure that the Bureau is supported from a planning perspective for the rollout of the remainder of the functionality. I'm still participating with the day-to-day staff who are working with the Bureau on the continuing system improvement efforts that we have ongoing. I wanted to provide folks with a brief update. Actually, first, I wanted to not take for granted folks who might not know the context for this particular effort, but since early 2020, the Bureau has been working with the Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Information Services, also known as the IT department for the department. And since that time, we've implemented several pieces of functionality, one of which, just to go through the list here, is an online non-accredited initial approval application, online consumer complaint submission form, the entire back office workflow for intake, investigation, and administrative disciplinary actions against those consumer complaints that are submitted or Bureau-initiated complaints, along with all of the legacy data that was associated with that from the previous system have been converted over into the new system. Additionally, the compliance inspection functionality, including the data from the previous system being brought over, as well as some additional data sources associated with that. Those are the high-level, large functional areas that we've rolled out into the new system since we've started this project. Also wanted to make a mention that since launch, several schools have submitted their non-accredited approval application via the online method and been evaluated through the new system and achieved approval. So we've seen some schools get through kind of the whole new cycle, non-accredited schools through that process. All right, so that's background. Let's focus in on some of the efforts that we are looking at moving forward. The remaining project scope that we have to tackle includes the remaining application types, so renewals, the substantive change applications, as well as STRIF claim functionality, annual fee and STRIF invoice collection, and the back office workflows associated with those. We've been working on those over the past several months and have also implemented several smaller scope system improvements out directly into production to sort of build on the larger areas that I had mentioned earlier and tune those a bit. Considering the remaining scope that we have since the last meeting, we've engaged with the BPPE project leadership and the DCA IT resources to look at opportunities to carve out pieces of that larger batch of functionality to try to push some of that to the new system more quickly. And so we've taken a look at that and also targeting areas that have probably more minor areas of functionality outstanding that can be addressed and moved out to production so that folks can start using it in the new system. And in looking at that, we've kind of replanned over the next, I would say, 4 to 5 months to really target polishing up the STRIF claim online submission and back office review into production, which has minor development kind of outstanding so that we can move that out early in the next calendar year along with the conversion of that data from the legacy system, and then target the remaining functionality to be rolled out later in the spring of next year. I will mention that the remaining functionality had been targeted for an earlier launch date, as I had mentioned at previous meetings. But during the testing that we've been having, we've had to revisit some areas of the system to ensure that they were kind of appropriately capturing data and had appropriate back office workflows that were needed before we rolled those out. So that's where we've been investing the time in polishing up those areas of the system. Just wanted to mention that in addition to the areas that I've covered as far as what we're working on, much of the functionality that we're talking about will kind of lay the foundation to positively impact the Bureau's overall website, offering more improvements to the institution search features, which will allow an opportunity to store more information on institution status, ownership type, along with opportunities to link associated citation and administrative documents directly in the institution search feature so that it's a little more convenient for consumers to access the information there. They don't have to go to multiple spots. Just wanted to mention as well that OIS from the Department of Consumer Affairs, the Office of Information Services, the BPPE leadership meet nearly every week to assess the progress and discuss the priority of the project efforts and just make sure that generally the ship is pointed in the right direction and we all know kind of what the next steps are and things of that nature. All right, that concludes my update. Would be happy to answer any questions. Before we get to the questions though, I just wanted to thank again the BPPE leadership and the staff for their partnership through this. These types of IT changes are big changes for an organization, even if you break them up into smaller chunks. And they've shown a real commitment towards working with us and seeing it through. So that concludes my update. I'm happy to answer any questions of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Appreciate it. We'll go ahead and open up to comments or questions from the advisory committee at this point.
This is excuse me. This is Margaret. You mentioned just toward the end there about getting the website so it is more functional, so a student can look up on the school page or on the page where you search schools, the citations, etc. Can you tell me a couple of things? Will that currently, if you want to look up, say, a school that teaches computer skills, there's a search function to find schools that have that and in their location. And what else will be linked to that and how soon will that happen? For example, will that include when the last inspections were, will that include a link to their annual report, to their fact sheets, to any other investigative actions involving them that they have reported to the Bureau? What kind of things will be linked, and how soon will that be set up so that students will be able to have that access?
Thank you for that question, Margaret. I'm going to speak to some things that I have a high degree of confidence that it will include. And then I'd also like ask if the Bureau staff on the call could please take this down as a follow-up so I can work with the team to get a comprehensive response. But what I can confidently say that I know is included there, Margaret, is I believe there is the preservation of the current kind of search parameters that the BPPE has on their current site, as well as some additional sort of search parameters so that when people are searching for things, they can search for specific schools that have specific programs, schools that are in specific cities, things of that nature. I also believe that the current listing on the BPPE website only lists the active schools, whereas I believe that on the website that the license search features that we're including with the rollout of the system in the larger functional scope will also allow you to search for schools that are not in an active status and bring those up as well. To your point on the more consumer protection type of arm of the information that will be on the license search, what I will say is I think there are some limitations from a policy perspective as far as what can be included. And I'm speaking here from having worked at DCA for quite a while on this one, in that I believe that certain types of investigative or inspection information can't be disclosed until it reaches kind of a certain milestone in that process. I am not an expert in the Bureau's laws or regulations, certainly, but generally speaking, and I have a high degree of confidence that we've included this functionality with the license search features, is that the ability to indicate or link a document that is associated with an administrative or disciplinary action, so that if you're looking up a school and you're searching for them, you could see, oh, this school has had an administrative action like a citation or something like that, and some of the descriptive information around that. What I'm not sure about off the top of my head is the last inspection date that you had mentioned. I would take that back as one of those items I could confirm with. And again, just want to ask, I'll take a note myself, but if the BPPE staff can keep me honest on this, I'm happy. I just need to go back and really review the functional kind of designs that we have so that I can confirm with 100% certainty what functionality that license search feature will include. The other thing I will mention in response to your question and kind of closing is that the functionality for that license search will go with the larger remaining set of applications that will be brought out. So that's not the early calendar year timeframe that I mentioned for STRIF claims and back office review of STRIF claims. That's more in the spring timeframe that we'll be looking at for that. So that will have to go over with kind of the last remaining chunks of data that are left on the legacy system that will migrate over when we roll out that functionality. Yeah, and one last point that I will make is the license search features, as with all of the features in the system, what we roll out initially is not what we have to live with in perpetuity. If Bureau policies change or there's a desire to change and include more information there, we can always do that as well. So I just wanted to mention that it's not a kind of a one-time set in stone type of thing. Thank you for the question. I hope that I answered significant parts of it.
That's a good start.
All right.
Committee members, any other questions or comments for Sean?
I'm sorry, I was just saying, yeah, and I look forward to hearing then back from Bureau staff as to those. I mean, I would like specifics as to these things will be accessible from that search page. For example, can you then see the annual report from there? Can you see the fact sheet from there? Can you see the most recent citation and so on? You know, specifically what things right now it's pretty bare bones. And so I'm very interested in seeing what you'll be able to find, because it's very cumbersome for a student. I mean, first of all, if they make it to the site, to then try to figure out, well, what do I know about the school besides they offer this course? So that would be great for maybe next meeting. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks again, Sean, for the update. Appreciate it. We are going to have advisory committee interactions with each of the sections, the letters under agenda item 5, but we're going to hold public comment for the entirety of agenda item 5. So members of the public, just make a note, and you will have an opportunity as we conclude. I think we have 7 categories under operations update, and then you'll have an opportunity to comment at the end of agenda item 5. So next we have the licensing report.
Wonderful. And as we transition over to that, that report will be given by Ebony Santee, who you are very familiar with at this point. She has been the Bureau's licensing chief for the last 2+ years, but I am very excited today to introduce her as the Bureau's new education administrator. So she's still kind of taking a role, and she'll be reporting both on licensing and quality of education today as we work to backfill her position. But congratulations to Ebony, and thank you for taking on both of these in the meantime.
Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. We'll get started with the licensing statistics. I'll highlight a few items. In total, we've received 230 applications. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. 6 of those full non-accredited approvals, 10 accredited approvals, 12 renewals for full approval applicants, 23 accredited renewals, 49 full approval changes, 60 changes for schools approved by means of accreditation, 8 verifications of exemption, and 65 out-of-state registration. As far as our average days to approve for the new full approvals, it is at 439. However, that's gone down about 51 days. For the new accredited approvals, it's at 231, which is increased a bit. We have been doing some research on processing times and so forth, so I will add a comment to the outliers in that section. One, the original application was incorrect. An incorrect application was submitted, as well as pending external approval from their accreditor. And another school took close to 10-11 months to submit all the signatures required for that application. So that's just an example of a couple of outliers that can affect those numbers. As far as our renewal for full approvals, those have gone down 30 days to 354. Also, our accredited renewals have gone down another 35 days to 164. And the accredited changes are down about 25 days. I will say there's a typo for that average of approval. It should be 199, not 236. But I did want to say a big thank you to licensing staff and quality of education staff for continually to work diligently to work on these numbers and processing. Next slide, please. As far as the oldest full app in the queue, that was 10/26/21. However, I was informed that it just became complete as of the 25th of October. The oldest full app under review was received in 2019. A bit that has been assigned and is with a quality of education specialist now. I did want to add a little background again for that application. It was incomplete for about a year. It was almost to the point of abandonment because we weren't getting responses from the institutions. There was some reassignment due to an analyst being on leave. And there were also some financial issues that took a number of contacts to get that up to date. The oldest renewal, full approval that's review does have discipline issues, so that's kind of on hold for now. And so the median date of full apps in our queue is from June of this year. The next slide, please. I do want to note there is a typo that 1823 should actually be 1828. We do have a 962 main locations, 357 branches, and 509 satellites. I will say from our last meeting notes, the changes in locations has gone down about 14, and that's mainly in the branch and satellite areas. So closures of branches or satellites, not necessarily main locations. And of those approval types, 416 are approved by means of accreditation, 523 are full non-accredited approvals. There's 1 conditional and 22 provisional. And we currently have 79 out-of-state registered institutions. And I believe that's all for licensing. There's questions from the...
Thank you, Ebony. Advisory members, any questions or comments for Ebony regarding licensing?
One question, Ebony. Thank you very much, and thank you for taking on double roles there for a while. On the one you were mentioning that was the oldest full application under review, where they had the school was delayed for a long time. Presumably, they were not operating during that time, correct?
Correct. They should not be.
Yeah. Is that something that you check on to make sure that they didn't surreptitiously start operating?
Yeah, we would, and if it's necessary to submit an enforcement referral, we would. But as an initial applicant, they should not be in operation. Very rarely, there are schools that potentially had operated previously under an exemption. I don't know for sure about this institution. I don't believe that is the case. But no, a new applicant should not be offering to the public or an operation without our approval.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions on licensing? Very good. So now you can switch hats. Do you have another hat to put on to talk about quality of education?
It's me again. No. So just some highlights on the quality of education, tracking and statistics. So this first group are schools that had been approved to offer degree programs prior to January 1st of 2015. So of those, 4 to 5 have become accredited, 49 either closed or expired. 19 of those became exempt. We have 3 that have an extension to gain that accreditation. 22 surrendered their degree programs, and 4 currently have suspended degree programs. Next slide, please. Of institutions that were provisionally approved after January 1st, 2015, 15 of those have become accredited. 12 have closed or their approval has expired. 2 became exempt. 10 have surrendered their degree programs. 7 currently have suspended degrees, and 34 are still in the process of pursuing accreditation. The next slide is just a visual representation of those who have obtained accreditation, those who've become exempt, who's closed, who have surrendered and or suspended their programs. Next slide, please. So this is just a breakdown really of just showing the different accreditors that the institutions who have become accredited have chosen. Obviously, the most being WASC with 20. Closely is TRACS, which is the Transnational Association of Christian Colleges and Schools with 13 schools. And then DIAC, which is a Distance Education Accrediting Commission, and so forth. You can see the breakdown. I'll take this moment also to make a comment on our ACICS schools. As we know, there was a decision made in regards to their recognition. We will have a second letter going out to those schools within the week. We've identified between 10 and 13 schools that this would apply to. With the changes of SB 1433 becoming effective January 1st, we want to make sure those schools are on track to submit the requirements of those new statutes. So like for our example, our schools that were previously approved by means of accreditation will need to submit a application for a non-accredited school as well as an accreditation plan. In addition, schools that are full approval, but had full approval with us, but also maintain an accreditation at that time, will be required to submit an updated accreditation plan, not have the ability to add any new degrees. Actually, that would be the same for both of them. And then those schools also, those degree programs would become provisional based on the accreditation plan that they submit. So we do have, I think, a strong grip on those schools and making sure that we get that information out to them quickly so that they will have time to submit those requirement documents to maintain their approval status, and there's no interruptions. And that's all I have for the quality of ed. If there are any questions?
Good, thank you. To start with a comment that commend the layout of data, the visual presentation of data, and it's really true for all of the sections in the ops update. So I'm sure you and others were involved in, and Chief Cochran, I'm sure as well, appreciate the look and feel of the data and the succinct summaries. It's very effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we definitely wanted to make it more user-friendly and visually appealing as much as these can be. But I think we're definitely on track now. And as so consistency between all of our units, I think is really helpful as well.
Yeah, I agree. Other questions or comments for Ebony from the advisory committee?
Yeah, I don't know if this is for Ebony or Debbie. With the long drawn out process of the removal of the recognition of ACICS as an accreditor, I am concerned about students now there being another very long process while the school manages to see if it can get accreditation elsewhere. And as I recall, there are certain requirements for notice to students about them not being accredited and so forth. But I am just wondering if you have any sense of how well the information is getting out to students about the fact that they're no longer accredited, and what the consequences are. I'm gathering if they're no longer accredited, then they are no longer eligible for federal funds there, even if they're still considered approved or conditionally approved or whatever by the Bureau. But I'm just, do you have a sense of how protected the students are during this, what will be a very lengthy continuing interim period?
It might be two-part. Debbie, feel free to hop in. I will say that in our initial contact a number of months ago, we did ask for any notifications or copies of that had been sent to students just regarding the ACICS situation as a whole, to make sure that students were aware of that. Additionally, in this letter that will be going out, we will again be asking for what has been sent, as well as schools kind of starting this provisional process. There are requirements of disclosures per our statutes that will also have to be distributed to students as well. Additionally, in terms of the federal financial aid, I do know that for schools that were to continue to receive funding, I believe it's for a period of 18 months, part of their PPE plan was that they did have to notify students of, send out notifications to students about the changes in finances and their accreditation status. So I think in combo with what we're asking for at a state level and those at a federal level, there is a sense, we also have included OSAR in our communications, a sense of what students, what types of notifications they are getting. I don't know if you want to add to that, Debbie.
I think you covered all the bases. I think, just as Emily said, she's really been kind of leading the charge on a lot of the communications to institutions because we know their approval status is going to be first and foremost in their mind. But also OSAR, Scott and the OSAR team are very involved in these efforts too. So that way we can make sure that we're kind of hitting both sides of that. And we're doing what we can to make sure that students have the information they need and that they know that OSAR is there as a support if needed. I would also just give another shout out to the OSAR team because I know they recently updated the FAQ for students who are at the ACICS institutions on the OSAR website. So we're trying to keep our eyes peeled for that as well.
Thank you. I'd be very interested to hear as we go along, to the extent that people have knowledge of this, what they're hearing back from the students about how well the messaging is getting to them. So maybe that's something that we'll hear in the OSAR report, or perhaps otherwise, but or in related to when there's inspections. Just I'd like some, if you have any feedback on how well students are getting the message and understanding what the consequences are for them. Thanks.
Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Any other advisory committee questions or comments regarding quality of education? Very good. Thank you again, Emily. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Very good. We will move on to 5D and the annual report update.
Perfect. For annual report update and the next couple updates, we will have Elizabeth Elias, who you've met before as our enforcement chief over compliance, discipline, and annual reports.
Good morning, members of the committee. I will be presenting information on annual report. The annual report unit currently has 2 vacancies. Both vacancies have been advertised and recruitment is underway. We hope to have these positions filled soon. The Bureau reminds institutions that the 2021 annual report is due by December 1st, which is a couple weeks away. The report submission must include the annual report, school performance fact sheets, the 2021 catalog, enrollment agreements, financial statements, and as presented at the last committee meeting, the new graduate identification data. ARU staff have been assisting schools with questions and processing materials received through the ARU portal. Next slide. Utilizing data identified through the ARU portal, the following slide demonstrates when institutions began initiating the submission of the annual report through the ARU portal. To clarify, this data does not identify when a report is completed or submitted to the Bureau. The most interesting data here is the number of institutions who started the submission of the annual report late, which is after the December 1st date as required in law. About an average 17% of schools each year have been submitting the report late. The other column of importance is the number of schools who have not initiated the submission of the annual report for the 2019 and 2020 reporting year. The Bureau is utilizing its tools to obtain full compliance with the annual report submission, and those institutions who fail to submit an annual report may be subject to a citation or disciplinary action. Next slide. To help institutions understand the Bureau's laws and regulations related to school performance fact sheets, the Bureau conducts several workshops throughout the year. Workshops are conducted in an online and interactive format. The next workshop is actually scheduled for tomorrow, and probably the one after that will be in February sometime. And that concludes my presentation for annual reports. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Elizabeth. I have a question to start us off. You mentioned the Bureau is using its tools to ensure enforcement of with institutions that have not submitted annual reports. Can you give us a little more color commentary on that? Like, it seems like a pretty objective, clear standard that you know what schools are approved and have not submitted. So what do you do? Do you send them a letter? Do you schedule them for inspection? What are you doing?
It's a twofold approach. We are sending letters, kind of giving them an additional soft date of submitting the annual report. And if they fail to provide the report, they will be subject to a citation or possible disciplinary action. Also, for the schools that have not submitted an annual report, we are working with our inspections unit to get our inspection team out to visit those schools and identify if there are any other violations that need to be addressed.
I have a comment, a question. First of all, thank you for that, including that information about the progress of schools submitting annual reports. This is something I think I had raised earlier and asked about how many schools were not submitting them on their time. So I'm glad to see that you're able to track that and then able to follow through and make sure that they get those reports in. So that's great. I appreciate the information provided to us on that. The second thing is if any of the advisory members wanted to attend any of the workshops that you were giving, I think there's a sign-up process on the website for schools, but how would a committee member be able to access that? Do we just contact Richie or Debbie or something, or what should we do?
You would just sign up like an institution would, and you would be provided the link to the workshop so that you could attend the workshop.
I think the last time I looked at that, it asked for some kind of your school identification number or something, which I wouldn't have. So that's why I was thinking.
I believe you can leave it blank or just enter in ones, and it will allow you to proceed. I actually had to do the same thing when I started and was learning what the workshops were all about. I had to register online and enter basically false information so that I could get the link so that I could attend the meeting.
All right, thanks.
If I could just add in one piece on that too, just because I also have done the exact same thing, tried to join the workshops myself, and I know I have been sometimes encountered just limits on how many people can participate. All of the webinars or the workshops do have limits, just so that way our staff can kind of triage questions that are coming up. If an advisory committee member hits those limits, you want to register for something and it's full, please do feel free to reach out to Richie or myself, and we'll find a way to get you in, because assuming you all are not going to be asking the tough questions about institutional compliance. So feel free to do that.
Thanks.
All right, thank you for the pacing information as well, Elizabeth. I think that's useful to see how many schools have opened applications and when they tend to do that. Under the compliance and discipline report, there is a reference to not submitting your annual report is cited as a common cause for a citation, but it's not broken out directly. So I think it would be useful, particularly because we're in this season. So at our spring meeting, having how many schools didn't submit their 2021 report and have they all been issued a citation should be a one-to-one relationship that maybe we could report on more explicitly in that meeting.
I definitely think that will be doable for the next committee meeting.
Good, and then I leave it to the committee in our conversation at the time, but that might be a pretty natural hallmark for the spring meeting, because the annual reports were due. How many of them have been are outstanding and have citations been issued? Very good. Committee, any other questions regarding the annual report update? Very good. We'll move on to 5E and the compliance and discipline report.
Okay. Currently, there are 2 vacancies in our compliance unit. We have recently finalized interviews for 1 vacancy, and we hope to make an offer soon. The other position is in the process of being advertised. In our discipline unit, we also have 2 vacancies, and both vacancies are currently advertised, and I definitely hope to have those positions filled really soon. The next slide. Okay. With regards to inspections, I just want to point out that the data is now presented in fiscal year versus the prior meeting, which was in calendar year. So the numbers may look a little different. Currently in this first quarter of fiscal year 22-23, we have completed 72 inspections, which puts us on track to complete the same amount of inspections that were completed in fiscal year 21-22. Although we do hope to probably exceed the number that was conducted in fiscal year 21-22. The next slide. This slide is a visual representation of the inspections by type, and the orange is announced inspections and the red is unannounced inspections. Next slide. This slide is a visual representation of the results of the inspections that were completed. The orange represents that no further action was required. The blue are the number of institutions that required an enforcement referral for violations that were identified during the inspection. And the red indicates schools that were issued a notice to comply, which they have 30 days after the inspection to come into compliance with those minor technical violations that were identified during the inspection. Again, the Bureau offers workshops to help institutions understand the Bureau's laws and regulations. During these workshops, the institutions are presented information on areas where schools typically fail an inspection in an effort to educate them and hopefully prevent a future failed inspection. During each inspection that Bureau staff conduct, they also inform the schools during the inspection of these workshops in an effort to get them to sign up and actually take advantage of the information that we provide to them. And the next workshop is scheduled for December 14th of this year. The following slides are disciplinary information. This slide indicates disciplinary actions resulting from an accusation that was filed against an institution. During the first quarter of this fiscal year, we've had 3 revocations of institutions and no other disciplinary actions. This slide are the enforcement actions resulting from a statement of issues. And so far this year, we've not had any disciplinary actions taken resulting from a statement of issues. This slide represents the other types of enforcement actions that we take, one being the emergency decisions. We did have one emergency decision that was issued in the first quarter of this fiscal year, and we've not had any automatic suspensions. We do currently have 8 cases pending an accusation with the Attorney General's office and 3 cases pending a statement of issues at the Attorney General's office. And this last slide represents the number of citations that we have issued. We've had 24 citations issued this fiscal year. We are currently behind in comparison to the number of citations that were issued last fiscal year. However, due to staffing and turnover, there have been some backlog that is currently being processed and should reflect an increase in citations in future quarters. And does anyone have any questions for me?
Committee members, any questions or comments for the enforcement chief?
This is Margaret. I do have a question. I think I noticed last meeting and then also this one, the percentage of inspections that are unannounced versus announced, it still tends to be quite a bit lower than it was in previous years, where the number of unannounced inspections was more or less equivalent to the number of announced inspections. I wondered if there's any particular reason for that.
So I did look into this for you. So I anticipated the question, and I did follow up with my inspection staff to find out why this may be the reason. And inherently, the law requires us to do 1 announced and 1 unannounced inspection. And so in the rotation, previous years, you may have seen unannounced being the majority of inspections being completed. And now we are conducting the other requirement, which is the announced inspection. In addition to that, we're coming out of the pandemic still. And during the pandemic, there was a push to do more announced inspections because the staff were running into schools that were not available due to a lot of the stay-at-home orders that were issued during that emergency COVID period.
Right, thank you. And then the other question is, on one of these charts, I'm not sure which one now, it seemed like the number of, and I don't remember whether it was the number of accusations or the number of referrals or citations, seemed to be lower in the past couple of years than it had been pre-pandemic. And do you have any sense whether that's just because of staffing issues or whether that's because you've gotten things cleaned up so there are fewer issues or some other reason? And if you don't have an answer off the top, I'll expect one next meeting then.
I don't have an answer off the top, but I will say that in reviewing some of the files that are currently in our backlog and that have been sent over to my discipline team to pursue enforcement actions, I do foresee that there may be an increase in the number of cases that are transmitted for disciplinary action against institutions. So we may be just catching up on the backlog that we have.
Thank you.
Committee members, other questions or comments for Elizabeth?
Hi, I just have a quick question, maybe slash thought. Thank you very much. Good information. Any thought to providing additional context on the inspection results and potentially offering what the top, say, 3 to 5 items were that caused there to be a notice to comply or the referral, just what the areas of opportunity were?
I thought we provided that, but maybe we did not. If we didn't, it's something that I can work on.
Okay.
I do think it's something that we can start tracking if it's not being tracked.
I
do think it would be. I'm sorry?
Oh, I was just going to say common violations are cited on 46. It has specifically to do with citations and not so much inspection reports, though, to your good question, Tess. So unlicensed activity, failure to submit annual fees, failure to submit STRIF, annual report, and school performance fact sheets are the 5 most common causes for citation, at least.
Most inspections do result in a citation and not necessarily disciplinary action. So these common citations that are listed under common violations listed under the citation slide would be the most common violations that we're issuing citations for. But I can see if we can start to track the number in the future so that you can have an actual number to look at in comparison to the citation. And very often, a lot of these citations are issued for several violations. So it's not just one. They may have additional violations that are, 2 or 3 of the common violations issued in one citation.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I have one other question. And maybe this is out of your area, but one of the things we had asked for in the past was an ability to search citations on the website by date, so we could see, what's happened in the inspections in the last 3 months or whatever. That function is not yet up on your website. Is that correct?
It's not on our website, but it is something that I am working with my discipline team. We are going to, in the future, be posting a monthly summary of all the actions that are taken, and they will be differentiated by disciplinary type. So all revocations, all probations, citations issued, and any accusations or statement of issues that are filed by month.
Slide 40 does a good job of showing how many inspections result in a notice to comply or a referral for enforcement action. No, I'm assuming no further action required means that there weren't any issues found during the compliance visit. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. And so it was about half of inspections resulted in some form of further action in the last fiscal year.
I would say about a third.
Yeah, is that
Oh, you mean in the last fiscal year? I'm sorry, I heard this fiscal year. Yes, in the last fiscal year, about half.
Yeah. And you mentioned maybe you're running a little bit lower on citations this year than previous years, but that's something you expect with staffing to change. On staffing, you mentioned 2 vacancies at the outset of this. That's against how many? What is the full team size?
For my discipline team, I believe we are 5 and we're down 2, and one of them is a manager.
So you're running about just over 50% of staff, and you're 3 on 5.
In discipline, yes.
Got it. You also mentioned in the annual report that you're also short. I think it was 2 positions there as well.
Correct.
And that's of how many?
5.
Got it. So I understand your urgency in getting those positions.
Yes, and we are making great progress on it. It's just the positions are currently posted. We're waiting for closing dates on those postings, and then we will be scheduling interviews and hopefully offering offers to the candidates in the near future.
Any other questions or comments on the compliance and discipline report? And then I assume you also do complaint investigations as enforcement chief?
I do not.
Oh, you don't? Oh, look at that.
So for complaints and investigations, we will have Daniel Rangel, who is our other enforcement chief over the other half of our enforcement team.
Got it. Right.
Morning, committee members. If Elizabeth wanted to take over, I'm happy with that. So. Okay, so I'll be presenting the statistics for complaints and investigations. So starting off with our first slide is the complaints received each month for the last 2.25 fiscal years. As you can see, we are continuing to receive a significant greater amount of complaints than prior fiscal years. One of the numbers that really jumps out is that in the last 5 months, which kind of goes back into the last fiscal years, 5 of the 6 months we are seeing the over 100, or actually in the last 7 months we've had 5 of our last 7 months have been over 100 complaints in those months, which is significant when you compare that to the last fiscal year or the 2020 and 2021 fiscal year where we didn't even break 100 once. So it's something that's really clustered towards the end of the last fiscal year and the beginning of this fiscal year that we're beginning to see. I know we've been kind of looking at what are reasons for the raise in complaints. And I know that I looked at when our online complaint system went online, which I believe was in September of 2020. But that was still during the middle of COVID and a lot of the shutdowns. And so what I'm kind of seeing is that as we are coming out of the pandemic, and also the more visibility and outreach that we're doing, and there's more awareness of the ability to submit a complaint online, and also just awareness of the Bureau as a whole to a lot of students. So, I think that that's something that's contributing to the rise that we're seeing. Next slide. So this is just a comparison of the contracted schools versus the non-contracted schools, and then also showing the number of schools that account for the entire amount of cases that we received. So we received a total of 317 complaints, and of those complaints, they're attributed to 231 schools. And then looking at the next slide is the closed complaints. So we are seeing a downward slide with the amount of complaints that we are closing in this first quarter of the fiscal year. A lot of that is attributed to staff turnover. Just looking at the numbers, like our total staff, I believe there's 21 positions, including mine. And we currently have 5 vacant positions, which 3 of them we have conducted interviews for and hope to make decisions on those very soon. 2 of them we're waiting to be posted for advertisement and start that recruitment process. Just looking at those numbers since I've been here, with the 3 that we are going to be filling here pretty soon, I will have filled 10 positions since I started here, and so that's roughly half of our unit. So I know that there were some staff that departed for promotions at other agencies, and then also There were staff that were promoted internally, which caused a vacancy in their previous position that had to be backfilled. So there's a lot of moving parts that we're trying to overcome, along with the amount of complaints that we're receiving. So it's been an uphill battle, but I feel like we are almost to that point where we're going to be fully staffed here pretty soon, and we'll begin to see the impacts of that. And then, so this is the aging for the cases that are closed in this first quarter of the fiscal year. Majority of the cases are closed within the first 90 days. I know that a lot of that is attributed to the intake process that also filters out a lot of the complaints. But then also there's other ones that go to refer to staff to investigate, that are ones that we're able to resolve quickly. I know that we've had opportunities even here recently where we received a number of complaints and we're able to jump out and resolve issues before there were violations, and assist in students' concerns, and working with the schools, and that was a great experience that we've had. So it's not always just finding violations, but also working with the schools and working with students to find solutions to situations that bring concerns. So that was something that we, as a team, we're happy to do more recently. So that those are some of the ones that would fall in that 0 to 90, which is the vast majority of our complaints being closed. And then also focusing on some of our older complaints that we have, to try to get those moving along and find a resolution to them, and figure out, how do we move forward and resolve those as quickly as possible, given the timeframes that they've been open. So you'll start to see that there are complaints that were older that are going to be closing. So we'll see more numbers with those as we have closures moving forward. This is a visual representation of just the closure dispositions for the fiscal year. So it also allows you to kind of see what are our top closure reasons. And so we have 45 no confirmed violation. And then on the other side, we have 32 that were referred to discipline. And then that's followed by our duplicate entries or consolidated cases, and then also followed closely by the mediated compliance obtained resolved by school. And then the ones that are exempt, non-jurisdictional, those would be the ones that would be closed at intake that weren't investigated. This is the number of cases that are being, or the top cases, dispositions that are being referred to discipline, with our number one being unapproved institutions, and then followed by contractual issues. So quality of education and quality of instruction. So the quality of education is just how it's administered, and quality of instruction is more related to the faculty concerns. And then I know that this is a very busy slide, and there's a lot of information there, but we try to give a breakdown of all of the different closure reasons for complaints that are closed at intake. So a lot of them are closed because it's like a duplicate entry. So where we got the duplicate entries are sometimes a student will file a complaint, and then we also get a notification from an accreditor who would forward the complaint to us, and it's the same information that they complained to us about. They also referred to the accreditor, and they just wanted to make sure that we got that information as well. On others is when a student files a complaint, they are able to upload supporting documents. But once they submit that complaint, there's no ability for them to add additional information. So a lot of times they'll just submit another complaint, which will generate a new complaint number. So in those cases, we would consolidate them and close the second or third one out as a duplicate entry. One of the other ones is I know that there's one that says insufficient evidence to confirm violation. There's no response from a complainant. Just so you know, too, some of the verbiage that's used here is what's available to us in Connect. I know that we are looking to update some of the verbiage to make it more clear as to what it is, or more explanatory. So for that one, I know that it was not very self-explanatory. So I just wanted to emphasize that with that one, it's when we receive a complaint from an anonymous person, sometimes we don't have clear information as to what the school they're complaining about is, or certain information that's pertinent for us to be able to open an investigation. And if they're filing it anonymously and there's no contact information, there's no ability for us to be able to get that clarifying information. So we have no choice but to close out the complaint. If it is an anonymous complaint and we do have enough information to move forward, then we will do that. But there's some instances where we're not able to. So this is our pending caseload. So the 256, and this is also a breakdown of the age. So 0 to 90, majority of our cases are in the 0 to 90 range, followed by the 91 to 180. We always look to try to complete our investigations within that 180-day average. Some are closed sooner than that. Some are closed a little further than that. It's just depending on the complexity of the investigation. And then sometimes too, just the amount of students that are complaining in a certain instance against an institution may prolong an investigation because there's more information to go through. So this is just a breakdown of where our pending cases are and what the aging looks like. I know that we have really emphasized looking at some of our oldest cases and closing those out, and identifying, what are the reasons that are holding those cases open, and then trying to resolve those issues and overcome them, and move those forward so that we can move all of our cases within the 1-year mark. Next slide. And then this is just a visual representation of the increase in the pending caseload. I know that in between March and June of 2021, we kind of hit a low, and then from there, there's just been a steady climb in the amount of cases that we have. And again, it's both attributed to the number of complaints that we're receiving, which are significant compared to prior fiscal years. And then also the staff turnover that I referenced before. And I feel like as we're coming to the end of the year, we're finally getting to a point where we will be fully staffed. And I think that that's going to show up in the numbers moving forward. And then the last slide is so far what our student impact is for this fiscal year, which is just the first quarter. And with that, I will open it up to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Daniel. Committee members, any questions, comments for the enforcement chief?
Hi, this is Margaret. I have a couple of questions. On the duplicate complaints, you mentioned that there's no way once the complaint is open for students to send in additional materials without opening a new complaint. Is that something that's going to be fixed in the new IT efforts?
That I don't know, but what we do is make an effort to contact the students if we're seeing that, and letting them know that they can always forward additional information to the enforcement email, so that they don't have to go through.
I'm sorry, you just cut out. Can you speak a little more loudly?
Yes. So we make an effort to reach out to the students if we're seeing that they're submitting an additional complaint, to let them know that there's the availability of the enforcement email to submit additional documentation. And also when we receive a complaint, we're pretty quick at getting an acknowledgement letter out to the student. So they have that contact information for our enforcement staff, so if they do have questions or additional information, they can get that over to us. So we expect that that's not going to be something that's going to be an issue moving forward. I don't know if that's something that would be resolved through the IT project.
Would it be helpful if it were? Or not necessarily?
I think it would be difficult because If they're submitting additional documentation in there, we may not see that information initially. So it's better just for us to be able to track what information is coming in rather than leaving it open-ended for them to add anything at any time.
And is there any kind of notice, or could there be any kind of notice on the complaint form itself online that if you have additional documents you need to send in later, here's the email to send them to, or do you not know which email should be used at that point?
Yeah, we would have our enforcement email that we can put that information on there. So yeah, that's definitely a great suggestion.
Might be a good idea. The second thing is on the exempt under 2,500. Do you have off the top of your head, a sense of where you refer those people then?
Yes. I don't know in those instances, but I know that even when we close a complaint, because there's not any jurisdiction, our intake staff make every effort to find somewhere for them to potentially find a resolution to the circumstance, whether that be some like an accreditor or other oversight agencies. Sometimes the complaint is about like discrimination, sending it to the Office of Civil Rights. So we do make every effort to try to find somewhere where we can refer them to that can assist them, and then also try to build part of the task that the intake staff have is to build relationships with new agencies that we weren't aware of previously, so that we can make every effort to help the student or direct them in a way that can help them best. But I don't know specifically off the top of my head an agency that we refer them for the under 2,500.
One of the possibilities for under 2,500 would be to refer them to the nearest small claims court, in addition to whatever agencies there might be, and or possibly, I know you may not know their income, but possibly any legal aid organizations in the area that you know that look at school complaints. So it might be helpful to have those included in your list for people to use as referrals if they're under 2,500. I look at that because, we set that because it was like, well, there aren't that many complaints in that area. They aren't as big a complaints as the, money loss is the other. But I think it's good to keep an eye on that to make sure that that's not, we're not winding up with a lot of people that are disserved by having that limit. So that's why I asked the question. Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And we will definitely use those resources.
Committee members, other questions or comments for Daniel? I have a one comment, Daniel. I was following a hunch when you looked at the increase in complaints, and the data understandably only goes back to fiscal year 2021, which was greatly impacted, as I recall, from the time from COVID. And so I went back down memory lane and pulled up an old ACM meeting materials from previously. In 2017 through 2019, those fiscal years, the average was about 80 complaints roughly a month. And so that the 5 of the last 7 months being over 100 is significant. And it's not a reversion to the means. It was what I was maybe wondering is do we just get back to normal pre-COVID periods? But it does appear to be elevated, just for your information and context. A question that I have for you is the unapproved institutions being a common. I'm curious how many of those, based on an earlier comment, have pending applications. Do you happen to know if that's common, or if those 22, like from slide 54, it's the most common allegation referred to the discipline unit, right? Is you don't have an approval. Are those often pending an application, or they're just straight road? They haven't submitted an application and they're doing something.
So from my understanding is that they don't have a current application, and I know that is something that is part of our process when we are investigating an unapproved school. Is we reach out to other units, including licensing, quality of education, to see if they have something pending. And then if they do, then we kind of work with them through that process. But then also make it clear to them that they can't provide those services until they are approved.
Good, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Very good, appreciate it. Thank you, Daniel. We'll move on to 5G and assume Scott with the OSAR report.
Exactly. Scott Valverde, our OSAR chief.
Thank you, Chair Holt and Assembly members. Committee members. I'm glad to be here to present for you the activities of the Bureau's Office of Student Assistance and Relief over the first quarter of fiscal year 22-23. Before I dive in to our charts, if I may jump back to help answer Margaret's previous question about students' awareness of and OSAR's perspective on students' awareness of what's going on with ACICS, given our role in the outreach piece of that. So I do appreciate Debbie and Ebony highlighting a couple of things that I would have said right away, which of course are updating our FAQ that Debbie mentioned, and also the notification that's going out to the schools this week that Ebony mentioned includes a request for updated student rosters, which we intend to reach out to and would be able to much more concisely and directly answer Margaret's question once we do conduct that outreach and engage with those students. But your question is my sense to date, sort of prior to doing that next outreach. And it's a little bit tricky to answer in that we have gotten rosters at some key benchmarks or at some key occurrences, such as when the department first made the announcement of derecognition and schools were required to provide rosters to us. They were provided to OSAR, and we did do some awareness outreach. And what I would say is that we got very little response to that, a very small sample size. But those students who did respond, Margaret, based on the nature of their questions and their request for assistance from us, seemed to imply that they were not well informed about what was going on and how that decision may impact them as a student. That was, in fact, the reason why they reached out to us. So what I will add to that that maybe hasn't been said is that more recently than that first wave of outreach we did, the Title IV schools impacted by ACICS, as a requirement of their extended program participation agreement with the Department of Education, we're also required to provide very specific disclosures to all of their current students as well. And so, having that requirement, pinned to their Title IV eligibility, I think it's sort of a safe assumption that they would want to make good on that and to provide those appropriate disclosures. So at least for the Title IV students, I suspect when we do this next wave of outreach, they will at least have been provided those notifications and hopefully more. And hopefully at that point have visited our website and our FAQ. And if not, reach out to us. And we feel like we have a role there in helping guide those students through what their options are. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Thank you. So, in addition to what I'm going to report on in these next several charts, of course, OSAR continues to be heavily involved in helping the Bureau's STRIF unit, which I know Yvette is going to report on right after me, in terms of assisting students with their awareness of their understanding of the STRIF program, in their eligibility, and helping them complete and compile those claims when a school closes. So again, the output of that is more reflected in terms of the STRIF units processing of those claims, but that is sort of a unreported in these documents, but high impact part of what OSAR does as well. So we're helping in that area. And then, of course, the other big arm of OSAR is outreach, and outreach takes form in various different ways in terms of audiences and locations and modalities, et cetera. And so again, that's what I'll report on here, starting with chart A, which is our informed choice outreach, really where the audience are prospective students, potential students, looking at private post-secondary or post-secondary education in general as their next step. So again, only having the first quarter of this year, we'll continue to build on this as we move forward in future meetings. So we've had several other fairs and engagements with students, workshops, et cetera, that have happened post September 30th. But through September 30th, we had done 4 events and reached 80 students with, on the CalTAP workshops, questions about utilizing their GI benefits, selecting schools within California, or distance education related questions, how to best research schools, things like that. We also were invited, DCA was invited through an assembly member representing the Fresno area for DCA to participate in their community health resource fair. And I think other parts of DCA were there as well. But at our table, we engaged with 45 students who had questions about, higher education and things like that. So next chart. Other student outreach efforts are basically, generally, we added this during COVID, this section where we separated out our actual workshops, where we have a date and a time where we actually meet with a group of students impacted by closures. We shifted much more under COVID through doing that through a model where we get rosters, do an email outreach that provides some important answers and resources specific to that closure, and then offers students to meet with us in a one-on-one environment through Teams or whatever. And so San Francisco Cooking School is an example of that, being the first one in this fiscal quarter where we had a closure, a roster, and a need to reach out to students that was done outside of a traditional workshop format. And so questions that we generally get both from students served in Chart B and Chart C would be accessing transcripts and records, questions about transferring to other institutions, loan discharges, benefits, things like that, and STRIF as well, if that's applicable. Chart C is a closure that happened this quarter where we did both a workshop in person, on site, and then also a virtual workshop. So we're again, there was enough of a need and enough of a response from students that we knew we needed to meet with them, sort of a group environment, and then again, the kind of a trickle COVID effect, this ability to sort of put together a comprehensive workshop delivered virtually. Many students, that's their preference. And so as I've reported previously, that's kind of our baseline model, I think, moving forward. And we were able to help 62 students from that closure. Next slide. So this was part of an effort, a previous effort that initiated with a discussion with this advisory committee. It's now getting close to about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, where the suggestion was made and well received that, to get to kind of report in this public setting, not only all of the events that we're doing and the type of outreach that we're doing and the places where we're doing outreach, but to sort of make an effort to sort of quantify the scope of our influence by actually reporting on the number of students served at our different events. And in doing so, we've then added these next two charts, which are follow-up phone calls and emails that we receive from students once they become aware of OSAR, whether it be at one of our outreach events or elsewhere, and the nature of the type of service that we're providing to those students who are reaching out to us that we hope would be meaningful to you as a committee as well, both in terms of just, like I said, number and where the need for student assistance seems to be lying based on the outreach that we've been doing. And so, as expected, phone calls, a high percentage, of course, are related to STRIF in one way or the other, whether it be completing the application, the status of a previously submitted application, helping them compile appropriate documents so that EVET's team can process those claims, et cetera. Also, transcript assistance is another. Transcript assistance and student loan relief are two very common ones as well. We often get students who are attempting to track down transcripts or other student records from schools that have closed, and so we play a key role in helping students navigate where those are and how they can get them. In some cases, the Bureau has them in our possession. In other cases, they're held by an outside custodian of records that we help connect the student with so that they can get those documents. We do still have another category. We're working at looking at that data very closely and identifying if there's enough worth pulling out there and adding that to an actual reporting data element. We use this data in other reports that we do as well. So it was also a win-win to add it to these reports, as it helps me prepare other annual reports that I'm asked to do. And so we're looking closely at other, and I know this is a question I think that Margaret asked last time. And so we continue to see students who reach out to us for various needs, like things about like professional licensing questions. If I'm transferred to this school, will I be able to sit for the same license exam that I intended to sit for when I started at this other school, et cetera. Employment related questions, we get technical questions related to like, how do I get a social security number or an employee ID number so that I can receive my STRIF claim, and other things like that. So next chart. So another about 300 students through email follow-up after our outreach. So it's about somewhere between 800 and 900 students touched by OSAR in this first fiscal quarter. Now, the one, I think, element that's still missing from this that is probably fairly significant as we dive a little bit more into it, I think I've mentioned this in the past as well, have been like social media engagements, website analytics, how many students are finding out about us and getting resources by going to various pages of our websites, watching the videos that we've uploaded, things like that. So that would be one of the potential missing pieces to really sort of capture sort of in this public space, like how many students is OSAR really engaging with and how are they engaging with them. But I think it's a much full and more robust picture than we have reported historically. So hopefully you appreciate that. And then the last chart is just mainly I added this because we only have one fiscal year of data to report. So just sort of like closing out and reminding of what we did last year as well, which is kind of an awkward year, a little bit of a tail end of COVID effect and some lingering COVID effects and some new issues that came up. And we got added more staff during that period of time, and subsequently have lost a few staff. So it was a little bit of a weird year, but I think overall reflective of, given those restraints, kind of like what our potential impact is, working directly with 5,000 plus students in these various ways, especially if you count social media and website engagements as well. So we feel like we're making the connections, hopefully, that you all feel we should be making and helping these students who are impacted by these various things. And I'll just say in closing, a couple of things have come up in prior reports that I just want to share that OSAR is very much involved in a lot of the discussions with discipline and enforcement and other areas of the Bureau, licensing as well. But we work very collaboratively to sort of be involved in thinking about and being the voice for how these potential actions may impact students in a very proactive way, and have helped guide and develop outreach strategies based on those collaborations with the other units, which I appreciate and look forward to supporting moving forward as well. So I'll stop there. If you have any other questions, I would welcome them. Thanks, Joseph.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. Advisory members, any questions or comments regarding OSAR?
This is Margaret. I appreciate the information, Scott. Very helpful, and I will be interested to hear what you find from your further outreach. I suspect sometimes that we unload a whole bunch of disclosures on students, but they don't really get it, or they get so much of it, it just like poof, and doesn't get through. So that was my concern about ACICS, and be interested to hear what you're finding as you send further outreach to them, because I'm a little concerned that, as with always, we're trying our best to get the information out there, but it's not necessarily getting through the right way. But I appreciate the information and the further outreach. I have a question on the calls and emails you get from people that you outlined here, which I think is very helpful. Do you ever get calls or emails from people complaining about a school and the practices at the school? And if so, what do you do with those?
I would say it's somewhat rare. I mean, a lot of the things that let me put it this way. A lot of the complaints that we hear directly from students about issues that they encounter directly at a particular school, more often than not, is related to schools that have already closed or are in the process of closing, and they're really, those issues are there, but the purpose for their reach out to us and their direction to us as the appropriate resource is really based on, restitution or transferring or whatever they may want to do, more so than involvement in an open school with a potential ongoing investigation, or if there's not an ongoing investigation, then what we would do in that situation where they came to us for whatever reason, found out about us, remembered us from a workshop or whatever, then we would definitely ask some follow-up questions to ensure that we're not just bouncing them around without some thought, that is the most appropriate referral to our complaint and investigation unit. Most cases it would be, but it may not always be limited to that. They may also be an appropriate person to file a borrower's defense claim. So before we do that referral, then maybe we're working with them on that, or another entity that may be involved and maybe an appropriate referral. Then we may make multiple, but generally, more often than not, it's already a school that has already closed. And when it's not, then generally we would just work with enforcement as the initial starting point and initial tip, maybe help the student find and navigate to the complaint form and help them do the complaint form, but ultimately lean into Daniel and his team's experience about taking that information and investigating it appropriately.
So if you got that kind of complaints right now, they would just be in that other category. There's so few of them.
Correct.
Yeah, those kind of calls. Okay. And so you don't really wind up having students where you're actually helping them fill out the complaint that often.
No, we do, but not that often. Yes, it's fairly infrequent, I would say.
Thanks.
Committee members, any other questions for Scott? Very good. Thank you very much, Scott. Appreciate all the good work.
Thank you.
We'll move on then to the Student Tuition Recovery Fund and round out the operations update.
Perfect. And for that, we've got Yvette Johnson, our administration chief.
Yvette, we're not hearing you. If you're mute, you might be muted.
There we go. It jumped back on mute. Okay, sorry. I'll start over. So good morning, Chairperson Holt and committee members. I'm Yvette Johnson, the administration chief and the manager of the Student Tuition Recovery Fund unit. Before I start on the statistics today, I would like to send a thank you to the Student Tuition Recovery Fund unit staff and for all the hard work that they do. We're a small team, but we're growing. And so I'm happy to report that since June of this year, we have been able to fill 2 positions, our office technician position, who assists with the intake of the STRIF applications, as well as telephone calls and answering emails. And then we were also able to fill one of our analyst positions. And this analyst is responsible for reviewing the STRIF claims and helping determine economic loss. I'm also happy to report that as of yesterday, I was able to make an offer for another vacant position that we had. And this person is scheduled to start on December 1st. So for the first time in a very long time, we actually have a full staff. And I look forward to all the work and the continued success of the team. I'd also like to thank other staff in the Bureau that while we were down so few staff, that they were able to lend a helping hand, and whether it be answering phone calls or reviewing applications, they've been instrumental in helping us get through the claims that we have, the STRIF claims that we have. So thank you to the Bureau in general. All right. So with that said, I'd like to start with the statistics that we have. So I'll be going over the, the statistics for the first quarter of this year. So far this year, we've received 34 claims. And we've also, though we received 34 claims, we've been able to close out 38. We've been able to approve 38 claims. 35 claims have been deemed ineligible. We have 4 claims that have been denied and 2 claims where we have been unable to contact the individual that filed the claim. Next slide, please. So the claims that we currently have, and this is as of 9/30/22, we have the analysts who review the claims for economic loss. We have 196 claims where they've done this, and this is where they make recommendations to the manager as far as whether or not a claim should be approved or denied. The analysts currently have 80 claims that they are actively reviewing. And there are 87 claims where we have reached out to the student to obtain more information. And we do this a few times with the students where they file their application and we may need more information to be able to determine the economic loss, or just getting more loan information from them, being able to get any receipts or anything that they have that they did not submit with the application. We reach out to them at least 3 times to obtain information. We try other resources that we have to reach out to the students. So if we want to verify that their email address is okay, that their telephone number is okay, and we may look at LexisNexis to see if we can find any more updated information on them. We currently have 764 claims in queue. And those are the ones that have not been assigned to an analyst yet. Next slide, please. So right now we have claims that are pending payment at the State Controller's office. So currently we have 3 claims that are pending payment at the State Controller's office, and they total $33,829. And so far for this fiscal year, we paid out $387,267 in claims. And our current STRIF balance is $18,431,378. And it is going to be decreased from that soon. And as you guys all know, by statutory, we have statutory limits on the STRIF. If it's above 25 million, then we stop collecting. But if it goes below 20 million, then we continue to collect. Next slide, please. Our next item is we have our large impact closures, and the Hilt, Wildtech, and Everest. Those are all part of the Corinthian colleges. So we're working on those, as well as the Silicon Valley claims. And as you can see, the Silicon Valley claims are a significant part of the money that we paid out so far. And that concludes the statistics for the Student Tuition Recovery Fund. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Yvette. I had a couple questions to kick us off, and we'll open to the rest of the committee members. All of the Corinthian schools were, the footnote indicates waiting on borrower defense for repayment applications. As you know, the department, it's been, I think, more than a year ago now, did block grant forgiveness for all of the outstanding Corinthian loans. And so I'm curious why they're still pending. I think that matter has been resolved. And so what other information is needed before we can close those out?
The matter is resolved. However, we are waiting for information from the students. We've been reaching out to the students to try to get information from them, showing us that their loans have been discharged and the amount of the loans that have been discharged. And so until we can establish the actual economic loss of the student, we can't close out those claims.
Got it. And you need the student to respond to that. You're not getting it you don't get that directly from the department. Got it. And so there's likelihood that's going to be a long tail, because a student who has not suffered economic harm or their outstanding loans have been forgiven, if they don't respond to you and give you that information, they're just going to remain pending forever.
Exactly. And that's why we're trying to be proactive as well as far as the claims that we have. We're reaching out to those students as well.
Right.
But it's not always going to be a response.
That's interesting. It'll be an interesting situation over time, because that could remain in perpetuity. Those schools closed now 8 years ago, and that's a long time ago. And the loans were forgiven by the department more than a year ago now. So I don't know what facts are going to change on the ground that you're going to start to close out a certain substantial number of those. We could be looking at that 5 years from now and still have students that you haven't heard back from. So I don't know if there's some sort of a closure process that would make sense at some point.
And we're trying to work with the Department of Education to see what information we can provide to them so that we can resolve those claims too. So it's not just to sit and wait all the time.
I'm sure we've had this information before, but the number in queue is attention getting to me. The 760 in queue. As you are the bulk of those the 889 pending for Silicon Valley, or?
Yes, the majority are the Silicon Valley.
Got it. And they're in the queue because you don't have an analyst or an investigator to hand it to yet, based on caseload assignments. Based on
caseload, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but like I said, now that we have new staff on board, once they go through the training process, looking forward to them getting involved and helping us bring those numbers down.
Committee members, other questions or comments for Yvette regarding STRIP?
Just following up on your question about those in queue, I think I may have mentioned this before, but I think it would be helpful for the licensing. We have a sense of how long it's taking for schools to get relicensed, and a sense of how much of that is due to schools delay and how much of it is staffing and so forth. But I don't really have a sense for those in queue, how long they've been in queue, or how long, once a person files a STRIP claim, how long it takes to get that resolved. And we have that kind of information for complaint handling. We have it for licensing. I'm wondering if that's something would be possible to get in the future on STRIP claims.
We can look into that.
Thanks.
Committee members, any other questions regarding STRIP? Very good. Thank you again, Yvette. Appreciate it very much. We at this time are going to open to public comment for the entirety of agenda item 5, which is the operations update that we've received from all of the various chiefs at the Bureau. So we'll open public.
Before you do that, Joseph, before you do that, just a comment on the overall agenda item. I think you mentioned this, and I just want to second. I really appreciate the presentation material, how it's been simplified and yet made clear, and how additional information has been provided that we've asked for. I really think that had been extremely helpful, and I thank you, Debbie, and all your staff for that.
Yes, totally agree. Thank you, Debbie, for being responsive and proactive.
Chairman Holt, just point of order. I think we skipped public comment on item 4.
We did not. I think from the DCA, I recall that we did have public comment.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No problem. So for agenda item 5 in the operations update, open for public comment.
We are now open for public comment on agenda item 5. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We'll now take a few seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you for that. Very good. We're doing well on time. We're going to keep powering through the agenda here and move on to item number 6, which is a status update and discussion on a variety of regulatory matters. Debbie, I'll have you drive for these.
Perfect. Well, I'm mostly going to turn it over to Dave Dumble, who is our legislation and regulation specialist. And I think most of these are pretty speedy updates, at least as far as we're concerned. Of course, the committee members may have more discussion that they're interested in. I know E and F are probably going to have maybe a bit more discussion, at least that we've kind of queued up. So maybe we just kind of take them one by one and see how far we get.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And just as a point of order to begin with, can I do B, C, and D together as one explanation because the report is the same for all 3, or do I have to handle them individually?
No, we're going to take public comment on all of agenda item 6. So I'm happy for you to take whatever letters match each other, and then we can do it. We'll stop for advisory committee comments at logical breaks within agenda item 6.
Thank you. Appreciate that. The first is a report on the ability to benefit package. Just to remind you, the legislature removed references to ability to benefit tests from the statutory language of the Act. This was an attempt to make sure our regulatory language conformed to the statutory language. The package was put out for public comment, 45-day comment period on September 16th. The comment period ended on November 1st. And in the 45-day comment period, we received one comment, and that was just to express support for the package. So we are now putting together the package to submit to OAL for approval. We're still working on that at this point, so I'm not sure when it will be sent over there, but it should be sent hopefully fairly soon. Given that there have been no comments, we're optimistic for a good outcome at the OAL. Are there any questions or comments about this?
Committee members, any questions regarding the repeal of the ATB language? Very good. David, you can move on.
The next 3, B, C, and D, are 3 regulatory proposals we have been working on and going through the vetting process with Consumer Affairs and Agency. They are the exemption for programs under 32 hours. Again, statutory change was made to exempt programs under 32 hours from the definition of educational programs unless the programs are designed to lead to employment. These regulations attempt to define what designed to lead to employment means. The out-of-state application is the revision of the out-of-state application process that was substantially changed by AB 1344 from 2019. And the substantive changes are SB 802 made 4 changes to the list of substantive changes that needed to be reported to the Bureau. This addresses 3 of those changes, an increase or decrease of more than 25% in the hours required to complete a program, institution beginning participation in federal Title IV financial aid, and a change from clock hours to credit hours. We went through the vetting process through agency and consumer affairs, got everything approved, and this was submitted to OAL, and notice was sent out on November 11th, starting the 45-day comment period for these three proposals. The comment period will end on December 27th, 2022. And at that point, we will take the comments we receive and prepare the materials to submit to OAL to submit these packages at that time. Are there any questions or comments?
May be helpful to advance the slide just one for that. The three of those are articulated in the table.
Yes.
We saw it, yeah. Which matched obviously your comments just visually. Advisory committee, any questions or comments regarding B, C, or D?
Yeah, on the, this Margaret, on the programs under 32 hours, I think that the proposed disclosure language is inadequate to save the catalog itself from being misleading. And because it basically has nothing near where these programs are, but has it only under the programs that are approved. And the catalog itself, I believe in most cases would say we're an improved institution, we participate in STRIF, et cetera, things which won't apply to those short programs. So I think that as drafted, that probably would wind up making the catalog itself misleading, that the disclosure that is proposed to be included would be inadequate to save it. So I don't anticipate any more discussion here, but hopefully I'll be able to file something in the comment period. But I just note that I do think that is very problematic. On the, and you haven't gotten yet to the last one, right? The substantive change. I'm sorry, that's not the one. I was not sure. The one that you included the language for in the packet, the method instructional delivery.
That's the next item.
Yeah, that you haven't got to that yet, right?
Have not gotten to that yet, no.
Right, okay.
Any members, any other questions on B, C, 6B, C, or D?
Yeah, if I can just respond to Margaret's comments. The language about the catalog disclosure was vetted through legal extensively and underwent a great deal of revision in the vetting process. And what we ended up with is what was approved by legal. And we are certainly welcoming any comments during the comment period, but this is what we arrived at the end of the process.
Right, I gather that. I just don't agree with the legal analysis.
Any other questions or comments on those? All right, let's move into 6E and the LMS update.
This is an additional proposal that we are submitting to the advisory committee for comments. As I mentioned above, 3 of the 4 substantive changes included in SB 802 were included in that package. This is the 4th of the substantive changes. It is the addition of 94894L, a change in distance education learning management system. This was not included in the package with the other 3 because the decision was made that the best way for schools to report this would be through the substantive change in method of instructional delivery form. And based on our past experience using that form, we thought the form could be significantly clarified and improved to ask for more specific information from schools. And so this form is significantly revised on matters other than adding the change in distance education learning management system to the form. The text is included in the package along with the revised form. I would specifically refer the committee to section 71600C, which is the, if we can move the form, the slides to page 78. Can we move ahead a couple of slides? Yeah. Anyway, in the materials, hopefully you have them. 71600C is the definition of distance learning management, distance education learning management system. We could not find a definition for this phrase. And so we put together a definition based on definitions of learning management system that we found, and then added in a reference to used for distance education into the definition. We believe this is satisfactory going ahead, but if anyone on the advisory committee has any suggestions or comments about a better way to construct the definition of what a distance education learning management system is, we would welcome the comments for this proposal. This proposal is, after we incorporate the advisory committee comments, we're hoping to roll this proposal out. This is a question of whether DCA would like us to do this at this time or hold back until and include it in our 2023 package of regulatory proposals. So does anyone have any questions or comments about this matter?
Thank you, David. And again, committee members, it's on page 78 of the materials. I don't know if we're having a technical difficulty or if the administrator, if you're able to advance this a couple slides. I'm not sure if it's included in the slide deck.
I think the best reference is actually the meeting materials. So thank you for that, Joseph.
Oh. Yeah, okay, the meeting materials, yeah, page 78 there. I can kick us off quickly, David, by saying that I think that the definition in C is workable and broad enough that it allows for I think the legislative intent there. I especially appreciate and applaud the addition of D to exclude upgrades to systems or renaming even of LMS platforms. It's been there's been a lot of disruption in that space as it's been such an emerging area of technology, and so sometimes the same LMS has changed names a couple times, and so I appreciate the avoidance of administrative burden for a change that isn't actually a change. I think that's helpful.
Thank you, and I have to tip my cap to OIS for helping us out with that language.
This is Margaret. I have one minor comment or question, and this is on page 77 of the meeting materials in, I don't know what its new number is, the last paragraph on that page. And it says, shall notify the Bureau of substantive change within 30 days of that change on the change of instruction form. And I don't find any form that is called by that name, change of instruction. So I think it might just, unless I'm wrong, it might be useful to use the actual name of the form that's intended for this.
Yes, that should be change of method of instructional delivery, I believe. That's correct.
But it's, I think it's attached to application for significant change in method of instructional delivery. So maybe
yes, yeah,
use that name just for clarity.
Yeah, and you are correct.
Yeah, on the page 78, I looked at this distance education learning management system. I looked at the statute. I looked at the existing reg. And I have to say, and it's, you know, I recognize it's partly my ignorance, but I haven't the faintest idea what would or wouldn't be considered such a change. So if I could, and I have a comment about D too, but for this one, so for example, if the amount of time a teacher is available to interact with students is changed from, 5 hours to 6 hours or 5 hours to 3 hours, is that such a change? I mean, I just don't really understand what is included in that. And I'm wondering if one way to help, and maybe it's not necessary, maybe I'm the only one having this problem, but one way to help might be to say, have a non-exclusive list that would say, and then say such as A, B, C, D, or other changes, so that you're not limited, but in some way, it gives a better idea of what you're looking for. And I don't know if that's helpful or not, but as it is, I don't really understand it.
No, the reference to distance education, I always trip over it. Distance education learning management system is a change in software. that the institution uses to manage its distance education
Why doesn't it say that then?
process. That's what it means by distance education learning management system.
Okay, well, I would not understand that's what it is meant to say. So I mean, if you could,
Yeah.
say
says
it means
Yeah,
a
it's
different
defined as an
software.
online system designed for the use of, so if we can clarify that, we will certainly take a look at it.
Okay, please do, because when you say we're talking about changing your software, I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I certainly didn't understand this. And then the D, I agree, it's good to have a clarification. I just think that sometimes an quote upgrade can include a major amount of change, and sometimes it's just tweaks. And sometimes a major amount of change could actually in effect change, how the program is used and so forth. So I wonder if there's any way to say an upgrade that only does, blah, blah, blah. That would be my question there, because I have seen upgrades just in, not in educational software, but maybe software I use as an attorney. And from one set to the next set, it's an entirely different means and method and so forth.
We would need to talk to OIS to see if there would be any way to define some parameters that would incorporate that, but we can certainly consider that.
Yeah, that would be and the reason I suggest those is if you're trying to enforce this and you get into a court, it has to be clear what it is that they didn't inform you about. And it's very hard if, there's a whole lot of wiggle room. Just an upgrade, unfortunately, could cover a whole lot of stuff. And you might find them, that's not just an upgrade, that's really a whole different means of going about teaching this subject. And yet you would have to have a legal argument about it and have experts and so forth. So the more you can clarify it here, the easier it will be to enforce and not have issues with trying to, figure it out later. So thanks.
Committee members, any other questions regarding 6E and the change in LMS? Very good. Thank you. We can move on to 6F.
Yep. And there is, the memo is included in your meeting materials. I don't want to rehash the memo in detail. I just want to hit the high points that of the impact SB 1433 will have on regulatory issues that will need to be addressed next year. And they're laid out, but let me just go over them quickly. First of all, section 1 adds the words as applicable to the Education Code 94801.5, which allows unaccredited institutions to out-of-state to apply. This has already been taken care of. The out-of-state application package that I referenced earlier, we put the words as applicable in the revised application, so that will not need additional regulatory response next year. Second issue was new Ed Code 94801.7 regarding out-of-state institutions refers to a limited physical presence in California and defines it in terms of having core academic support services. Both of those terms are broad enough that they will probably need regulatory, or almost certainly need regulatory clarification next year. Third issue was the changes to 94887, which allows the Bureau to deny an application if there is anyone if there's an owner, someone in control, or a managerial person who had knowledge of, should have known, or knowingly participated in any conduct that was the cause for revocation or unmitigated discipline at another institution. That language will need to be clarified in order for that to be enforceable. The next bullet point was the issue about how schools that are terminated, the approval is terminated upon the date of a school closure. If the school does not choose a date of closure, then the Bureau is authorized to select one, and that will have to be worked out in regulations as to what that process will be. The last one is the change that allows us to give approval to public institutions operated by other states that have a physical presence in California. And this will require the creation of a new approval process, as public institutions are significantly different than the private institutions we've been approving under our current process. So that will require additional regulation. And in addition to that, the the statute also requires us to revise any regulations that are in conflict with this proposal by 2024. And we don't anticipate there being a lot of regulations that will need to be revised, but we'll have to go through the regulations and make sure we are thorough in checking all the regulations for anything that would interfere with our regulation of a public institution as opposed to a private institution. Are there any questions or comments about this memo?
I have one to start regarding the 94887. That language is going to be incredibly important because of frankly, because the statute is so vague. Particularly, institution manager is a term that's going to need a very clear and I would argue restrictive definition as to where in the org chart you're referring to or the statutory intent was for institution manager. And I would argue high in org chart, and then the vagueness of should have known, for example, right? And that's an area. Well, I know educational institutions are going to be watching for that language very closely, and desire to have ample time for input and feedback in that drafting of that regulatory language. And I know that we'll have that opportunity here through the advisory committee.
This Margaret, on that same section, I agree institution managers needs to be defined. The statute says they're members of management, which is not too helpful. But I would suggest that in my experience, the school directors say that an institution has, 5 schools or 10 schools or an online component. Each of those usually has a separate director, and those directors in my experience, have been knowledgeable about and are actually running the school. They may be doing it based on what someone told them to do, but they are certainly able to, presumably they're in charge of their school. They could say, no, we can't do it that way. So I think we need to look at that a little more broadly than what you're suggesting, Joseph. On the should have known, had knowledge and knowingly participated, I would suggest not trying to define those in our regulations because they have sort of legally defined by statute and by case law meanings. So should have known, for example, is in the California standard unfair business practices law. And there's, tons of caseload about what that means. And I think with those kind of terms, those are used commonly enough in all kinds of civil law that rather than trying to reinvent it, or if there is an attempt to reinvent it, it should simply use the case law where it has already been defined, rather than try to do something else. And it's not entirely clear, but I assume that what had knowledge of is the same as actual knowledge, whereas the should have known is the same as reasonably should have known, or, so there are legal areas where those can be found, and they probably don't need to be defined again, or if so, they should be carefully tracking the meaning of the law. The unmitigated discipline, I don't know what that means, so I think that would be very helpful to, in this context, see what's meant by unmitigated. Because I can see instances where maybe the school did some things, but not everything they needed to do, or they did, they're required to do something, but in fact, that didn't cure the problem entirely. So yeah, I think this is an area that will need quite a bit of work, but hopefully within the, where we have existing definitions that we don't need to reinvent them. Thanks.
Committee members, any other comments on the memo for these regulatory changes? Very good. Thank you very much. We will now open for public comment for agenda item 6 and all of the regulatory matters that we've been discussing.
We are now open for public comment on agenda item 6. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment in the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, thank you. Committee, I'd like to take a quick temperature check. We're coming up on noon. We have really only one substantive agenda item left. I believe we'll probably wrap up in the next 30 minutes or so. I would encourage us to just power on and go through 12:30 unless somebody thinks we need to take a break. Committee members, any strong opinions about needing to stop, or do you think we can power through?
I vote for power through.
Thanks. I think that was Lee.
Joseph, would it be all right if we just took a quick 5-minute break and then came back to power through for that last stretch?
Absolutely, yeah, I'm totally open to that. Yeah, we can do a quick bio break for 5 minutes. So we will do that now. We're just taking a break, suspending the meeting at 11:55, and we'll be back at 12 noon. See you all shortly. I am back. Lee, are you here? I think I heard Canson. Canson's back.
Canson's back.
Great.
I'm here.
Great.
Kevin Powers here.
Oh, hey, Kevin. Thanks. Melanie?
I'm here.
Oh, great. And Lee, are you back? Margaret, are you back?
I am. Hi.
Oh, hey. And Tess, are you back?
I am, yes, thank you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Tess. So it looks like just waiting on Lee.
I'm here. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Great. We are set and ready to move on. Oh, did we do public comment for 6? We did, yes. So we're ready for the application timeline analysis, agenda item 7. Debbie, you want to take that?
Perfect. I'm actually just going to hand it over to Ebony again to walk through some of what she has been leading the team through. I'm excited to be able to share some of this with you.
Great.
Thanks, Debbie. So there was a memo included in the meeting notes, and I just wanted to take some time to kind of highlight those and get some feedback from the committee. So obviously in recent months, given the lengthening timelines and stakeholder feedback, the Bureau has heard your concerns and is taking efforts to understand the application approval timelines. The goal basically is what are the causes of the unnecessary delays in the process and how we can address them. A couple of items that have been done already. We've had staff discussions where we've looked at frequent institutional challenges, any internal confusion, inconsistencies. We've had an analysis of deficiency letters. We aggregated a number of initial deficiency letters sent by each analyst in the Bureau, as well as the Quality of Education Unit to analyze whether particular problem areas existed and analyze that information. Additionally, we did what we called a chess clock analysis for several applications that were recently approved that took lengthy timelines. We charted the movement of the application between the Bureau and the institution to identify the time each entity was in possession to uncover factors that may contribute unnecessarily to delays in processing. So basically this memo just outlines some of our findings regarding this process and next steps currently underway or considered for next steps. Primarily, we focused on non-accredited institutions, like new approvals, but obviously the information that we garner from this can be used with all of our other types of applications. So one of our first findings was that applications submitted frequently include conflicting information. Things such as institutional name, program details, information about financial aid, faculty, and organizational structure. Additionally, there might be incomplete or non-compliant financial information, whether that's the reports that we're getting done, address what's required, the proper timelines, and so forth. We currently do conduct licensing workshops to assist new licensees to understanding the minimum requirements for the application process. We are considering whether we need to refine these existing workshops or develop new ones or other resources that may better help applicants understand the submission requirements and avoid any unnecessary deficiency letters. When looking at deficiency letters, we also saw that there was a variation in the level of detail requested by different analysts. So there is discussion underway regarding what types of documentation is needed to verify compliance, what warrants documentation across the board versus specific circumstances. We really want to work on consistency between all of our analysts who are reviewing applications, so schools are thus having the same request. Staff is going to consider whether changes to the applications are more clearly articulated and a statutory or regulatory requirements that possibly could improve the application quality. Another area is that, we uncovered that sometimes 5 or more deficiency letters can be sent to a single applicant. Most of the time, we allow at least up to 30 days for an institution to respond. There's oftentimes requests for extensions in that as well, so that again adds to processing time. Staff are considering, is there a limiting the number of deficiency letters that are sent? Should we be supplementing those with phone calls or emails or other avenues? For unaccredited institutions, there's often a lengthy transition between the licensing review and the quality of ed review due to that backlog and staffing shortage. I'm happy to say that the Bureau has prioritized filling those positions, and we actually have filled the current opening for the quality of ed position. That individual will be starting this month. And we also want to consider whether additional positions are warranted as well in that unit to address the needs of applications coming through. For another item that I'd like to hit on is that lengthy timelines often lead to unnecessary cost for would-be institutions because the application does require evidence of the appropriate location that has been secured. Speaking specifically to like having an executed lease if you are applying. Leadership is developing solutions to ensure that we're consistently implementing procedures to explicitly allow applicants to submit applications before securing or executing that lease with the understanding that no approval will be granted without that documentation of the appropriate location. So in conclusion, the Bureau really welcomes some feedback from the advisory committee on this topic. Specifically, we're looking at possible additional resources needed beyond licensing workshops, what factors possibly should we consider when determining the appropriate number of deficiency letters. I will say that process, we've seen all the way up to 5 or more. And also it's important to note that if a application is denied during the appeal process, schools are also able to submit mitigation information, and that can happen once, twice, or more times, even up until a hearing date or at hearing. So that's something also that we've noted too. And any other opportunities able to make our licensing process more streamlined. We do, of course, have our online applications as well, but we really want any feedback that you may have that will help us in determining further course of action and helping these processing times. Thank you.
Thank you. Have any committee members, what feedback or questions do you have regarding the memo on the timeline analysis and next steps?
This is Margaret. I have a question on your deficiency letters. If you're sending out 3 or 4 or 5 of them, are they letters that are you still haven't provided what I asked for the last time type letters? Or are they, well, you've cured A, but I sent you a letter about A through D and I've only got response to A? Or are they, you cured A, but now I see there's a problem with D? In other words, are these ones where you're repeatedly having to ask for the same thing, or are different things popping up with what they supply?
Usually it's a repeat of, so I'll start with that. The review is a complete review of all areas of the application. So our initial deficiencies should outline any deficiencies that we've found. So subsequent letters will outline either we've received the wrong information or it's not actually answering the deficiency that we've outlined. So we really would very rarely see something pop up that was never noted initially. It's usually in response to it's still not correct, or we still haven't received, let's say, compliant financials, or they make a change to a document and that's incorrect, or it still doesn't address the initial deficiency.
It seems to me that, I mean, I'm sort of torn both ways. I mean, I recently tried to change the ownership of my car from me to my trust, and I kept going back and forth with a robot, not a real person, and they kept asking for different things, and I was glad that they didn't just say enough already. Too bad. On the other hand, it seems like 5 deficiency letters is an awful lot to try to get something fixed that should have been fixed after the first one. And I'm wondering if there could be a way to reduce those numbers, and also to give them notice up front. You know, if there is a deficiency, we will send you a notice outlining all the deficiencies. We will work with you to try to correct them, but we have limited ability to do so. So please try to address everything in your first response, because we will not continue this process indefinitely. I don't know the language, but something to sort of put them on notice. Don't screw around, get it right the first time would be helpful. I guess I don't, since I don't have that experience with this, I'm really not the person best to give suggestions. I would think maybe some of the schools, if any are in attendance, might have some ideas on this. But yeah, I can see that. And the other thing is, when you're tracking the timeline, I don't know if there's a way to do this, to track the timeline during which the Bureau is needing to do something versus the timeline during which the school is needing to do something, so that rather than it looking like the Bureau is taking forever to do something, the Bureau has done what it needs to do, and now the school is taking 2 months to respond, or whatever that is. Just statistically, that might be helpful for us to see. And also, I think schools legitimately are concerned that these applications be handled expeditiously. And for them to be able to see, okay, that's not the Bureau's fault in these instances that we're seeing here. We can see there's this amount of time that's the schools on the schools thing. So I don't know if there's a way to do that. So I don't know if that's any help to say that. The other thing about, I can see why you might want to try to do as much as you can internally, because when you start having to deal with an appeal, then it gets a lot more formal, and then that takes a lot of time and hassle. But I don't know. I can't help you very much with it and my ideas, but I really appreciate your looking into this and trying to figure out how you can better process these.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate that. I will say just in reference to your note about the deficiency letter and process, once an application is complete, the institution does receive a letter that does give a high-level outline of the next steps in the process. And we do note in there that you can receive deficiency letter if deficiencies are found. It's not necessarily saying you're only going to get one, but it does let a school know that that is part of the process. And I think, you know, what you brought up financially, it could be a bit more expensive on the mitigation side once it's gone to the DAG and so forth. So sometimes it's, you know, are we going to deal with it on the front end, or are we going to deal with it on the back end on how many deficiency letters that we do send? But I definitely appreciate your comments, and we'll take those.
You know, another question related to that, and I don't know if you have the authority to do that, whether after a certain period of time, you could send a letter saying, because, you know, we have sent you so many deficiency letters, X number of deficiency letters, and you still have not corrected it, we're going to put this application into an inactive status or something like that, so that you're not having to carry them on your timeline of what's going on. I don't know if you have the power to do that or whether that might be helpful.
Great, I'll make a note of that. We can discuss. Thank you. If you're speaking, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. Thanks, Ebony. Committee, any other questions or comments? Feedback? I do have a couple notes I'd like to share. Thank you first and foremost, Ebony and Debbie, for doing this analysis. Appreciate the responsiveness to express concerns from stakeholders. Very excited to see what your leadership team comes up with in regards to the lease timelines. That's a clear flaw in the process that I'm glad to hear that you're looking at a way to cure that and resolve. And I know stakeholders on our side, on the institutional side, would be happy to engage with you and talk to you about some of the logistics around that. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions about the practical matters related to real estate. The chess clock analysis, I thank you for doing that as an ad hoc basis. Seems like something that you might be able to embed in the process, which would be useful in future times. So this was an ad hoc analysis, but maybe you could just make it a feature of your system that you keep that chess clock and know how much time is on us and how much time is on them. I would echo Margaret's comment that that would be persuasive and useful in communicating with institutions. So that's something that you might be able to just codify and make that more formal. Similarly, I'm tracking an easy to grab data field for the number of times a school has requested an extension is another compelling data point that you could probably pretty easily track on an ongoing basis. And then looking at you have very high average times, obviously, and that's one of the issues, but being able to qualify outliers, right, or restrict outliers, like what percentage of applications are completed within, 50% of applications are completed within, 6 months, for example. Starting to look at it rather than in an aggregate one lump where you have a lot of high side outliers might be helpful too in terms of displaying the data. And on the point of how many denial letters is too many, and do you, just for my 2 cents, I would think somewhere in the order, if the original order is complete, which you indicated is typically the case, then somewhere between 3 and 5 probably would be a sweet spot. I think certainly over 5 would seem excessive, just from my experience.
I'll also add the deficiency letters. It could very well be 3 letters, but if there's something minor, I do know that analysts are in the practice of reaching out, not so formally, whether it's a phone call or an email. So if it's like, oh, hey, you missed, this letter on this regulation, or this is missing from your enrollment agreement or something very minor, we will do that as well. So it's not just a formal letter. So when we see those letters 5 or more and they're very formal, it's for significant missing information.
Yeah. And the 2 areas certainly on your side to give careful attention to would be the delays in quality of education, which I know you're applying that would evidence in the chess clock analysis, right? Like you'd be able to see, where are they getting stuck?
Yes.
That would jump up. And the other one is training. It's good that you have new staff coming on, but making sure that you have consistent and robust, rigorous training for people. It can be very frustrating for schools to get deficiency letter A and then cure those and then get deficiency letter B, which doesn't use the same, appear to use the same criteria or is inconsistent with earlier communication. And also missing or inconsistent information between verbal conversations and the content of the letter. And sometimes I know schools express that they feel like they're chasing a moving target. Like, what exactly is it that you want? And part of that could be on the school, right? And their misunderstanding or ignorance. But I know there are opportunities to improve the training of your bureau staff as well, making sure that they're consistent and that both of the analysts take the same view of the same reg, right?
Thank you.
Committee members, any other feedback on the timeline analysis and next steps? Thanks again for undertaking that work. Really appreciate it. Let's move on to public comment for agenda item 7 and the Bureau's memo on application timeline analysis.
We are now accepting public comment for agenda item 7. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand. We will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda? Yes, let's go ahead and do that. Our next agenda item is agenda item 8, which is future meeting dates that were included. The 2023 dates were included in the packet. Appreciate that. I do have a quick question. I know, even for my personal availability, I'm not available for the November meeting. Is that something that we want to handle via email after people have checked against calendars? Or do you want Debbie, would you like to open a discussion now with committee members to greenlight these dates?
Richie, what do you think is preferable? Should we try to nail down something now, or should maybe we can pinpoint the dates that seem problematic now and then figure out alternatives via email?
Yeah, I think that sounds helpful. Let us know which dates you immediately know you're not available for, and then we can work it out through email.
Joseph is not available for November 15th. Otherwise available.
I can tell you that Melanie is not available for May 16th.
This is Tess. I have a green light for all the dates.
Lee is fine with all 4 dates as of now.
Yep, I'm good with all. Margaret.
Okay, hearing no other objections, it looks like we're elsewise good.
Joseph, can we just take a moment to just hear what folks' thoughts are about virtual versus in-person meetings? I know we had a little bit of a discussion about that at prior meetings, and I think the rules around this are changing. But to the extent that we are allowed to hold meetings in this format, kind of fully virtual, I would be interested in hearing committee members' thoughts or preferences on whether to continue in virtual, mix it up, or is that there's some point at which we should go back to in-person?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we, to confirm my understanding, certainly through June of 23, so the first two meetings, February and May, will be remote, will be fully remote.
Well, we are allowed to hold them fully remote.
We are allowed to do either. Okay, great. So feedback from the committee, what are your thoughts? Remote versus in-person meetings?
I have a preference for in-person. This is Tess.
And this is Kenson. I prefer remote.
Good.
This is Lee. I definitely see the benefits of in-person, but just for logistics and scheduling purposes, remote is just much easier for me to attend.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah. I again, I agree. I see the benefits of being in person, but given the unknowns and the talk about there being a possible surge during the winter, I think that we should continue to do remote as long as we can. Or if people want to do it in person, have a setup where we can easily keep at least a 6-foot distance between us and be masked when we're not talking.
This is Melanie. I echo what Lee and Margaret have said. I can see the benefits in doing this in person, but logistically, remote is better for me.
This Margaret again, maybe going forward, sort of last half of the year, or even years after that, we might. Well, I guess after that we wouldn't be allowed to do them remotely, but it seems like it would be useful to have at least one meeting a year in person. So that might work with beginning, I guess, in our August meeting next year and going forward. I don't know.
I like that idea of trying to prioritize at least, like picking one meeting in person and then kind of seeing what the temperature in the room is for the others. But August seems like a good one. I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Yeah, I think for my part, I think that the benefits of the convenience benefits of remote meetings probably on balance outweigh the benefits of in-person meetings. But I really like the idea of maybe having an anchor meeting once a year, or even twice a year, meeting in person. Of course, a lot of this will depend on what the legislature does going forward. I know that's an item under consideration. Because Margaret, to your point, we may not have the option going forward. We'll have to see how that develops.
Well, it sounds like for now, with respect to just pinning down dates, I think associated with pinning down dates is, of course, pinning down the resources we need to hold the meetings. So I think what we're hearing is for February and May meetings, we'll expect to do those virtually in the similar format to this. Right now, we will go ahead and plan for in-person meetings for August and November because, again, hearing the idea of appreciating the idea of one in-person meeting or more per year. But right now, in August and November, according to the law, that's what it needs to be. So, resource-wise, we'll go ahead and plan for in-person for the second half, and we'll revisit that as the months go on, and we'll recirculate some new date options for the May and November.
Very good.
I just want to ask real quick, so I think we could go ahead and assume February 16th would definitively be the next meeting. There's no conflicts. And then for the May 16th meeting, the day before or day after, who had a conflict with that? Would the 15th or the 17th of May, just when I'm looking?
That was me. This is Melanie. I will be gone that entire week.
And then you, Joseph, for the November date?
I am out for that entire week.
Okay, thanks.
It's helpful.
Very good. Thank you, Debbie. That's a good conversation. Thanks for prompting that. we will go ahead and open for a public comment on agenda item 8. That is the future meeting dates for the advisory committee.
We are now accepting public comment for agenda item 8. If you would like to make a comment on future meetings, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, thank you. Move on to agenda item number 9, which is our discussion for future agenda items. Committee members, this is our opportunity to suggest agenda items for our future meetings. In this case would be specifically the February meeting. And I'd like to kick us off on that regard. I do have a suggestion, I think a necessary suggestion, that we schedule elections for committee leadership for the February meeting. We've wrapped up this year, and so I would ask that we add to the agenda item early in the first meeting of next year that we elect the chair and vice chair positions for the committee. I know staff has noted that. Committee members, what other items would you like to see on future agendas?
Miss Margaret, I don't have any new ones, but maybe look at some of the old ones. The old suggestions that haven't made it yet.
Do you have a greatest hits list that you keep track of?
Oh, I don't. I'm hoping the Bureau does. I would have to go back and look.
Anybody else from the committee? Suggestions for future agenda items? All right, very good. We'll move on then to public comment for agenda item number 9, future agenda items for the advisory committee.
We are now open for public comment on agenda item 9. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And Mr. Chair, we have a comment with the question of if it's not too late. I assume that means that it's a comment request for agenda item 8. Will you allow it?
I will, given the consistency with future meeting dates and future agenda items. They're logically aligned.
All right, bear with us just a moment. Linnea Ray, we're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
About the future meetings, having it remote, we as a team have learned so much by being able to attend these meetings virtually for those that are not local. So that was just my comment, and these are such valuable meetings, and I learned so much. So that was it.
Very good. Thank you for Linnea for your comment. Appreciate the feedback.
And with that, there appears to be no other requests for comment.
Very good. We can go ahead and close public comment. And that brings us to the adjournment of our meeting. Thank you all again for committee members and members of the public, and certainly first and foremost, Debbie, you and your staff and all the great work that you guys are doing. Wish you all the best as you continue to fill your staffing vacancies, and appreciate all the hard work.
Agreed. Thank you all. Happy
Thanks.
Thanksgiving.
Yes, thank you all. Hope you have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.